Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. I am your host, Justin Dixon, and today we've got Dov Yoran on the podcast. He's the co-founder and CEO of Command Zero, which is an autonomous and AI-assisted SOC platform for complex enterprise environments. It's a really interesting episode because it's all about cybersecurity. Dov has been a successful entrepreneur, has had 3 exits, 2 of which to very large organizations. So if you talk about kind of what that post-integration work looks like going from a startup into a very large enterprise. We talk a lot about cybersecurity. We talk a lot about threat intelligence. So if you have any questions or concerns about cyber, I think you'll get a lot out of this episode. So let's get Dov on the pod. Interested in hearing conversations with private equity leaders, CEOs of private equity-backed companies, and startup entrepreneurs where they share their stories about their career journeys, starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, and the important role that having the right talent plays in building a successful business, then you are in the right place. Welcome back to another episode of the Growth Capital Podcast. Here's your host, Justin Dixon. All right, Dov, nice to see you. Thanks for being a guest on the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Justin. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, why don't we jump right in, give a little bit of an overview to those watching and listening about who you are, where you are, and what you're up to right now.
All right. Well, my name is Dov Yoran. I'm co-founder and CEO of Command Zero. We're an autonomous SOC investigation platform. So we help automate the incident response and the investigations in your environments. I come from a long life of working within the cyber industry and the cyber domain. So the last 30 years of my career have all been around cybersecurity.
I always like to know like people's like origin stories, like how they get started, why they start businesses. Like I was looking back at your career and it seems like you've been a bit of an entrepreneur, you've built some things. So maybe kind of walk us through some of the iterations of your career and then we'll dig deep into Command Zero.
Sure. Well, graduating college, I was actually more of science. I was a chemistry major and did the whole pre-med route. And sort of putting off med school, I went to Accenture. And I was really forward-leaning on some of the strategy and technology projects in financial services. And then there was a project, cyber project, that really captivated me. And then a few years later at the time, my brothers had started and co-founded Riptech, which was one of the first MSSPs. So I got a front row seat right there as a product manager, helping to grow the business and how we worked, creating security operation centers across, in the US at first, and then post-acquisition and by Symantec at a number of places across EMEA and APAC. And from there, I had a small boutique cyber advisory firm. So we'd help young companies get up and out into the industry. So helping them build and grow as they evolved. And then I had 2 startups that I co-founded, just got the itch and jumped back into it. One was ThreatGrid, which was basically a threat intel platform that created content from dynamic analysis. And we were acquired by Cisco. And the other one was Polar Security, which was a data security posture management company that was acquired by IBM a few years later.
How was it kind of building these businesses from like, were you always ideally going to build it to then sell to a big company like a Cisco or an IBM? Or like, how do you kind of start a business with that kind of in mind?
Yeah, no, it's not starting with like, hey, I'm going to flip this. That is always the wrong answer. And I would caution, it is not, you don't create something to make money and, as a hobby. It's a passion. You want to create something that's going to have impact, help your customers, help them sort of drive and achieve a problem. And you're building a business, building it the right way, right? An acquisition or other things will happen if it makes sense to do so. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And the timelines longer or shorter, or if ever. So, you don't build it to get acquired, but you keep an open mind as the company grows and as new opportunities or present themselves to allow you to bring this technology and the platform to a broader audience. So that's some of the things that are going into the thinking of when to get acquired if it presents itself.
And then when you got acquired by Cisco or IBM, did you end up implementing or staying with the organization to then kind of help build out that product line into their either existing, cybersecurity similar products, or like how did that kind of post-acquisition working for, these are massive companies. So how did that kind of transition happen?
Yeah, both yes and no, and have opposite stories. So in the Cisco world, when we were acquired, it spent the year kind of helping on the integration, kind of picking the company apart, if you will, sales and marketing and finance. But we were mostly R&D into the appropriate buckets within the security business group at Cisco. And that was about a year. And then spending the next part of my career there actually not only globalizing that offering, but across the entirety of the Cisco portfolio. So technology alliances, integrations, eventually corp dev and investments, and sort of third-party ecosystems. So that whole world of plugging and playing into the industry across all of Cisco security. It was an amazing experience to grow and scale at that. It was a unique opportunity that was truly rewarding. And on the IBM acquisition, I was actually the founding chairman of the board. So I did not go with the acquisition, but also the rest of the team did. And that was also a great outcome. I'm still in touch with the teams, very close, and they're doing great work over there.
I'm curious about, like, I've worked with a lot of startups, and, obviously once you get to a certain level and stage, buyers start coming after you, whether it's a big strategic, like, a Cisco and IBM, or it's private equity or something like that. I'm curious about your post-acquisition integration experience. Like, what's that like for the acquired company? You're a small business, you get acquired by a behemoth like a Cisco. How do you translate that to your team? Because obviously they joined you as a startup, and some people love startups. They hate big companies. And so inherently there's probably going to be people that are nervous about that transition. So how did that happen? Once you were like, yep, Cisco is the right one for myself and for the company, how do you kind of translate that to the team? And what were some of the impacts to people that you maybe had to, ask to leave because there just wasn't a spot? Like, how did that work?
Yeah, no, it was quite the contrary. And Cisco is a great example of that. It was a wonderful acquisition. Part of the reason why we chose it is value to the customers, value to the investors, but value that we could bring to Cisco. So it was a great fit. And we were essentially a keystone to that arch across their network, endpoint, and cloud security products within the group. So there was a lot of it was a high value element there. It was to the contrary, where no, it was a culturally aligned conversation, right? The ethics and the cultural practices at Cisco very much aligned with what we had. We had our own culture. We were able to preserve that, even splitting up the critical mass teams that were still together, bonded, and had their elements. And Cisco does a really good job of balancing the approach of, yes, integrate as fast as possible, get on the global price list, train the sellers, bring over the marketing, the branding, sort of trying to diminish or sunset the legacy brands and cater towards the master brand of Cisco. All those things. And honestly, the first time you go through an acquisition, it's really hard. So when we got acquired by Symantec years before, learned that lesson, and it gets easier every time. And it's just part of the things that kind of help create that. And I'm very proud to say that almost all of the employees stayed 4, 5, 6 years plus. So wow. It was an awesome outcome for us and for shareholders and employees, but also for Cisco itself.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, because some people are, anti-big company, and they join startups to not kind of make that transition. What about from a customer perspective? Obviously, they're buying from you, and I guess, was there any kind of communication that need to happen to your current customers of, hey, we've been sold, here's what the benefit to you is, here's what's going to change? Was there pricing changes? Like, how did that conversation go to customers?
Yeah, very carefully. I mean, listen, these customers they're your partners, right? I mean, they're believing you, you're presenting something new, from the entire world, and they chose to leverage you for whatever problem you're solving. And so they're deep relationships. And honestly, how an acquisition is conducted and how it comes forth in a new company really can impact that feeling afterwards. And with the Cisco acquisition, it was night and day, where we did a great thing. We catered, we white gloved, we worked hand in hand, and you run separately for a period of time, even as part of being acquired, and then eventually it merges. And so there are sticking points, but holding it and being attentive, and the benefits, honestly, far outweigh, some of the concerns, right? We're now part of a much bigger ship. There's the stability and the security of a bigger company. There's the pains of some of the pricing that you mentioned, that there's not as much flexibility at times. But, the other side, the Cisco team was incredibly, open and wanting to make this a successful integration. And so, doing the things that they could do culturally, business-wise, technology-wise to help integrate and make sure that the merger was a success. So it was a lot. It was a lot of fun. I mean, but certainly wasn't all lollipops and rainbows.
Right. Well, let's jump up to Command Zero. You've obviously been successful in having multiple exits throughout your career. Why go again? And then what about Command Zero was such an interesting thing to kind of start? Because I was reading some of the kind of materials online that you kind of started it a little bit in stealth mode and then, kind of launched it publicly after a couple of years and raised some money. And it seems like it's been growing like a weed. So in a good way. So maybe talk us through the origin story of Command Zero. And then, would love to kind of unpack kind of the growth that's been going on in the last few years.
Yeah, we took some time off after, the last exit and really just looked in and across the industry and kind of where there's still problems to be solved. And this is the industry I refer to, cybersecurity specifically. And it's just been a challenge around looking at events within a security operations center, understanding what actually is an attack, the anatomy of the attacks that are happening, defining them, proving them that they actually happened, or proving them that they did not happen, right? Validating these incursions. And so the problem has always been a challenge, and it's only gotten worse, right? The world is more complicated. You have more customers and partners. You have more environments and other folks interacting, right? The complexity of everything is that much greater. And layering on AI on top of that. And, it's a unique opportunity to actually say, wow, we can actually solve this problem and solve this challenge, or at least put a great dent in it and making a lot of progress. And so leveraging some of these modern technologies and the agentic approach, what we do is we take the intent of the investigator and we embed it into our platform, and we're asking questions and during the investigation, doing a lot of that drudgery work and enabling teams and enterprises to deploy AI in a very sensible, logical, predictable way. And so we're really excited about the effects that our customers are feeling and how they're deploying, and some of the consistency that they're seeing in their investigations. Yeah. So it's a blast.
And cybersecurity is such a broad term, and there's very kind of different definitions or different segments of cyber. So for those that are not, 20 plus year cyber experts like yourselves, maybe share a little about what you're kind of solving for specifically. And I guess then also add on, like, are you selling this to very large enterprise? Are you selling it to SMB, all the above? I'm just curious kind of the market.
Yeah.
So let's start with the definition kind of side of it, and then we'll move into who your kind of customers are.
So what we're doing is we're enabling a team or an enterprise, the enterprise security team, to understand if an event had happened. So we're taking a lead. A lead can be alerts generated by your products, and they're bubbling and escalating, and the volumes of alerts are increasing and the sophistication of those, right? That's one lead. Another lead could be a bespoke internal investigation, HR-driven, employees' behavior, other kinds of things. A lead can also sort of take an outside-in approach. Here is threat intelligence and indicators that might be prevalent in your environment. All of those things are leads, right? An investigation is investigation at the end of the day. And so what we're doing is we're taking that investigation and we're driving truth to it. Is it a true positive or a false positive? And we're collecting the evidence from the various data sources in the environment to prove or disprove that. It's more colloquially thought of as, an autonomous AI SOC platform. We're automating the incident response around that and enabling you to take corrective actions if need be once the validations have been proven.
And is this a growing problem given that everybody is, implementing AI at a very kind of rapid pace, and maybe they're not thinking through some of the security hazards? Maybe talk a little about the kind of growth of this being a need to be able to focus on the growing threats, but then, to your point, understanding what's a false positive and what's an actual threat that you need to go and tackle.
So it's less of a problem because of AI, because of deployment of AI internally to some extent. It's more AI as, the adversary is chaining attacks together and more dynamically and faster.
Are you then helping them mainly focus on the threats that are actually real and kind of eliminating the time that they're spending or wasting on false positives?
Well, in the second half of that, though, it is a growing threat because the environment is more complex, and the more the volumes of attacks that are happening, you have to increase your responses at a much faster rate. You have to increase your detections and your understanding of those attacks in a faster, more automated rate. So that is all, going up and to the right. And so we help do that in a more automated way and in a more efficient way. So dialing back, 9 months or a year and a half ago, it was not quite sure if this was going to be a real market segment or not. CISOs and enterprise practitioners were, this is interesting, not quite sure. Today, it very much is understood and known. It's a real sub-market within cyber. How do you bolster your cyber defenses and provide more autonomous, more AI capability and leveraging agents into that approach in a safe, predictable way.
And is this a solution for very, very large enterprises only, or are you selling this also into kind of the SMB companies? Like, who's kind of your ideal customer for this?
It really depends on the level of maturity of the enterprise or the organization. So yes, if you are Fortune and you have a large security operations center, staffed 24/7, you got teams and teams, it's an obvious inherent benefit, right? We're helping end-to-end security practitioners, from the more junior folks at tier 1 doing the triaging and sifting and escalations, to the more senior folks running down and validating and proving out, and also enabling remediation. So we help that in a very easy way to discern. And it helps all the way down to a mid-market enterprise. I kind of sort of think of it of 1,000 or a couple thousand or several hundred at least employees. It's not indicative of size. It's indicative of maturity. They have to have deployed an EDR, an endpoint detection response technology, identity, collaboration. So we help teams if they're fully dedicated, like that large Fortune, or much smaller teams that have outsourced to an MSSP, an MDR, or service provider to do that work, to help them look at escalations brought by those service providers in-house, and doing that stitch work and those investigations in a much more timely manner without sort of living in it day to day. So it is a good wide slice. Honestly, essentially, with the explosion of attacks, this is a universal deployment that every enterprise, mid-market down and smaller and large, are going to need to deploy. It's going to be a matter of the environment, moving forward and growing slowly over time. So
yeah, interesting. You've been, kind of co-founder of a few different businesses over a number of years. What was it like kind of with Command Zero? Obviously, you kind of started it back, I think, in 2021, 2022 timeframe, but then kind of really launched it a year or two ago. Obviously, now we're recording this in mid-July 2026, so AI is kind of at the forefront of everybody's mind from a usage perspective. So how has it changed being the CEO, co-founder of a business in an AI world versus, back when you were building ThreatGrid and Polar Security around building a business that was pre-AI?
Oh, very, very different. One of the things that I've always kind of operated under the assumption of, show rather than tell, right? Like, it's just the mindset, and maybe it's a bit conservative or antiquated, of saying, actually, build a platform, making sure it's working, pull in customers, work with them iteratively, really get the solution to fit that narrative and those problem sets, and then scale and build that, and then bring it into the public eye. And so that is pretty different from what most cyber companies operate under. And so we very much followed that model. And in today's modern era of AI, it is an incredibly fast-paced environment. It is also incredibly noisy, right? It doesn't take much to sort of vibe code something over the weekend or a couple of weeks, and show and kind of talk the talk. And you're kind of not really sure who's who in the environments. And it's incredibly hard for the enterprise to discern and understand the differences when they all start sounding the same. So we're excited in a lot of the advancements that we're doing to kind of separate ourselves from the pack. I think the reputation and the teams and sort of, the ability to build these things over a sustained period of times, and some of these technologies that we've built are still out there, still bringing value. So we're pretty excited in that crowded, noisy space to stand apart.
Yeah. And then let's talk about the business itself. Like, where are you in the journey of the business? How big is it? How many people do you have? Let's just kind of get a little bit of nuts and bolts on the business itself.
Sure. We are a seed invested company. So that seed that we mentioned is the capital that we've raised. We did a SAFE as part of being an RSA Innovation Sandbox finalist last year. So pretty modest amounts of capital into the company. Today we're about 40. We're headquartered in Austin, Texas. And everyone in the company is based in the U.S. and Canada. So we have a large presence up in Calgary. Majority of the team is in R&D, engineering, building the product. And then we have customer success, sales, sort of forward-leaning engineering around it. And so we're pretty excited. I mean, we have customers across, every vertical practically. And they have some unique challenges, but there's a 80-20 rule of the baseline of, these are challenges that every enterprise is facing. So we're excited to sort of, swing above our weight and punch over our weight, right? And be able to satisfy some of these large and just really diverse sets of businesses.
And then being in Austin, how many, I guess, employees are local? And do you have a ideation or a thought on the hybrid remote in-office dilemma that a lot of companies are tackling around? Where do we hire people? Where do we place them? How many days are they in the office, if at all? Like, what's your take on all of that?
Yeah, even ThreatGrid, honestly, 15 years ago, right? We were mostly remote. We had headquarters, and then most of the team was remote, and we still had that mentality. So hiring the best talent in the seat wherever they are, we prefer to keep it all within North America, within the U.S. and Canada, so that we have that time zone ease of work without sort of having to worry about that. I just feel like as you grow the company, as you bring employees in, everyone has an impact on the business. And for me, it's culturally important. People have a sense of ownership in the business and in what they're doing. And at our stage, right, 40 people is tiny. Everyone does have an incredible impact. Every single person that comes in on how we grow in the company. So, trusting them that they're doing their job, right, that they're part of the team and they're pushing us forward. There's a lot of rope for people to have the flexibility to do that in the environments, at their home environments and working. And to us, it's a great way of collaborating. And we offset it by doing, in-person meetings and things of that nature, and all hands and all teams meetings, throughout the year. But we very much endorse that remote work mentality.
Yeah. No, I mean, Austin's a great place to, there's a ton of cybersecurity startups in Austin, and there's just a ton of SaaS talent there. Having lived there for 5.5 years and worked with a couple of cyber companies there, there's a lot of good talent locally, but obviously just in North America. I guess as we kind of wind things down a little bit here, let's talk about kind of the future, where the company is going. As we mentioned, we're recording this mid 2026. So I guess, what are some goals that you have for the rest of the year? And if we jumped on a podcast a year from now, like, what are some things you'd have been like, yeah, we achieved these things, and so we're off to the races?
We're pretty excited about, some of the things that we've launched even today, actually, through line some of these continuous investigation elements in the past couple of months, more forward-leaning and MCPs and APIs, where a number of customers are going to be building their own in-house technologies to help, their AI SOC capabilities. So helping provide them with the plumbing to leverage us for some of those elements.
So is that the build versus buy kind of like conversation, where are you going to just, if you need to kind of do this kind of threat intelligence, you're going to either build it yourself or buy it? Like, how, maybe kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's so think of the infrastructure, right? So they have their context, they meaning the enterprise, right? They understand their problem sets and some of the unique questions that they can ask and sort of their own processes, right? Their playbooks of what they've done. Some of those things are great. And it's, again, kind of going back to how easy it is for a competitor to vibe code as it is for an enterprise to vibe code and some of those initial building blocks. Absolutely encourage it. And we think it's great. Those are great partners to have. There's things though that we can probably do better than, the enterprise becoming sort of a software development team, right?
Yeah.
The maintenance, the support, and some of, the reliability, the SLAs, and other kinds of things, the infrastructure that we can fundamentally plug in our agents, into the back end and into their processes so that it's seamless to what they've already built. That to me is very exciting, how quickly that's going to deploy and how quickly agents are going to be leveraged and utilized as coworkers of SOC teams, right? And that the agents are going to work collaboratively and transparently with the analyst, empowering those analysts. So it's not just automating and doing away with those analysts, but better empowering those analysts to do more. So looking at the numbers and some of our case studies and how I'm very excited to see how those are going to actually increase, effectiveness and efficiencies for our customers. Obviously, overall, just growing the business, bringing on more customers, more partnerships where we can intercommunicate and work together and bring about better synergies between what's been deployed and using them across a broader set of problems, for things that have already been purchased and deployed previously by the enterprise.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a lot of fun actually seeing how that transpires.
And with the kind of the build and versus buy model, like is that a situation where you are trying to build the pipe as opposed to selling them the whole infrastructure, and so allowing them to kind of plug in your agents and things that you build into their systems directly, so you'd still be able to, I guess, charge them for something, but you wouldn't be kind of running the whole system?
Yeah, that's right. I wouldn't say necessarily building the pipe, but operationalizing business context in the reasoning models that folks are developed internally. Data source connectors, right? We spend a lot of time on instrumenting and maintaining access to different critical data sources and pulling those highways, I guess, in pipes is what you were mentioned earlier, into aiding the investigation, right? Contracting and SLAs and these trust services, right? Making sure, right, maintaining SOC Type 2 environments that we do so that they're in policy compliance. So there's a lot of, I call it infrastructure, but it's specialized, unique thing, part of that within your security tool set that we're maintaining. And that stuff is just, probably better for the teams to specialize and less on that part of the equation than on the things that are really truly custom to the business itself.
Yeah. Are there any things that you would like high level advise a company startup, whether they're a startup or an enterprise, to really think about as they are, expanding their AI capabilities, as you're seeing the threat levels and numbers go up? Like, are there kind of table stakes things that every company, regardless if it's one person or 10,000, should be kind of doing to make sure they're as safe as they can be without, going full scale and, if they can't build their own kind of SOC team and all that?
Honestly, a lot of it goes back to basic principles of cyber hygiene, right? Deploying, understanding, maintaining networks and systems in their current rates, password management tools, right? The boring things that we do at consumer side, or we should be doing, right? Making sure those are effective, training teams on, anti-phishing and other things, and sort of, right, by now will make that obviously much more challenging. So, are there things that are new because of the AI? I think that just the frequency and the complexity of those things will be there, but leveraging AI themselves, right? Those are models that people are now adopting and getting used to.
Yeah.
And so treating that with, a bit of caution, but boy, the economic benefits seem incredibly compelling at this point in time for lots and lots of businesses.
Yeah. AI can be used for good or evil, depending on which side of the coin you're on. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A little scary, but makes a lot of sense, and it keeps companies like yours growing and being more needed than ever. So let's kind of wind things down here with a 3-pack of questions that I ask every guest. So first question here is, what is a book or podcast, if you have a podcast, that you would recommend to the audience?
There's a book I read a few years ago that I really enjoyed. It was called The Power of One. And it was an incredible story about a kid growing up in South Africa and all the trials and tribulations that he went through, and just the perseverance and the lessons around that. It was incredibly entertaining. But it was a pretty special read.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about that. I will check that out. Interesting. All right, favorite thing to do outside of work?
Oh boy. I wouldn't call it my favorite thing, but I do go to the gym. In fact, I hate going to the gym, but I do it to relieve stress. But you're saying outside of work?
Yeah.
There's very few things outside of. There's very few things outside of work. I mean, I've got 2 young kids, the business, the startup life, and all those things. So there's sleep is thin, as is any other social activities.
Yeah, well, sometimes you just get away and get a good sweat, throw some weight around at the gym. So I can totally appreciate that for sure. Maybe this last question will be a little bit challenging then. Favorite vacation spot?
Oh boy. I grew up skiing, quite a bit. So I started snowboarding also the last 10, 20 years. And, I won't say like there's a specific mountain, but like, going skiing and trying to get away, meeting cousins or taking the kids and the family, right? I have an 8 and a 6-year-old, so helping them get on. And that's a whole different ball game. Just even getting their equipment on as they're, tumbling all over the place. But that's fun. It's something just different. Especially if you can go to sort of a nicer weather place than just the ice storms of the East Coast.
Totally. Yeah. I grew up skiing in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So not the biggest mountains in the world, and they were pretty much all ice. So getting out west or even up into Vermont would probably be more beneficial. So
what it's worth, I'm a Steelers fan. I grew up, so that's a pretty fun coincidence there.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, Dov, this has been a lot of fun to learn more about you and your background and Command Zero. I guess if people want to reach out, maybe they've got cyber questions, they want to just chat more, what's the best way to connect with you?
Email, dov@command0.ai, LinkedIn, and we certainly have the website, command0.ai, right? That's a great forum. It's an awesome group of folks across the team. So love and welcome any conversation, and looking forward to hopefully seeing some of you guys online.
Awesome. Yeah, no, we'll put all that stuff in the show notes so people have easy access to all that contact information. So Dov, man, it's been a lot of fun to learn about you and your story, and I appreciate you being a guest.
Thank you so much, Justin. I appreciate it. Take care.
I hope you found at least one actionable insight from this episode of the Growth Capital Podcast, your one-stop shop for insights from private equity leaders, CEOs, and startup entrepreneurs on starting, investing in, and scaling successful businesses, as well as the role having the right talent plays in growing a successful business. It would be greatly appreciated if you would rate and review this podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and drop us a comment so we can expand the audience of this podcast. Thank you for all your support, and don't forget about upcoming episodes dropping every Tuesday.